Well, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's Sustainable Procurement Pledge USA webinar. I'm Anthony Fuller, and along with Augustina Cadonius, I'm co-chair of the USA chapter of SPP. So, today's topic, don't you find that title kind of intriguing? Deliver value to suppliers? That's not what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to get value from suppliers. But I think in reality, we know as procurement professionals that in order to achieve anything with our suppliers, we have to create a win-win relationship with them. And that's precisely what we're going to talk about today, how to collaborate for success, even in something like reduction in Scope 3 emissions. Now, what's really interesting is that we'll cover the question of how do we move on from data gathering. So data gathering, data collection, as we know, for many of our colleagues, is frankly where things start and stop. That's all we want to do is collect the data, track it, monitor it, report it. What we're going to talk about today is how to move on from that, because data are only useful to the extent that they create insights, and insights are what we need in order to identify actions. And that's the logic we're going to talk about today, right? How do we move from data to insights to actions? How do we work with our suppliers to drive meaningful actions that really serve to reduce Scope 3 emissions? So we're going to hear a lot from an excellent panel today. We have some wonderful participants who all have real-world experience. And also we have Bob Young, who will be moderating the session for us today. I look forward to introducing him in just a second. But as ever, this would not be an SPP event without the housekeeping. So let me just quickly go through some of the background rules on what we're going to do today. So the session is being recorded, will be available post-hoc on the YouTube channel. We strongly encourage interaction and questions, so please use the chat function on Teams to raise any point, to ask questions, and we will try to get to as many of those questions as we can in the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. Of course, if you're not a member already, please go find us. We're on the internet, of course, and on LinkedIn. Please join our group, SPP USA, and try to take the Sustainable Procurement Pledge if you can. SPP aims to create a worldwide community of professionals dedicated to sustainable procurement, hoping to achieve 1 million people taking the pledge by 2030. Please make sure you join us and sign up as part of SPP. So before we start, let me introduce Bob. So Bob Young is General Manager of ctrl+s for the Americas. I met Bob actually for the first time in person at this year's Scope 3 peer group in Chicago, which was an absolutely excellent event. And in many ways, today's event is a follow-on from the Scope 3 peer group. Bob has many years of experience in industry, particularly in areas such as product development, commercialization, and operations. For the last 8 years, he's been focusing on working across the value chain to facilitate the supplier-customer interface to achieve emissions reductions. He therefore has extensive knowledge of this space, is an excellent person to moderate today's discussion. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Bob. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it. Well, as Anthony mentioned, this concept of delivering value to suppliers is something that's becoming much more of an issue. You know, in the past years, it's been we've had a lot of focus on reporting, and as needed because of regulatory requirements. But what happens with that focus often is we get low response rates. You get responses from companies who already don't need your help. They're already on their journey, so usually larger organizations. And why is that? It's because it's just they see it as a burden. Just see it as something that they have to do for you that has no value for them. And so shifting from reporting to actually driving reduction requires that we really help suppliers to on their own journey and provide so that they can see it less as a burden and more of a help for their business. So that's really why we're here today, is we share a few ideas, brought together this panel. You'll see, you can go ahead and change to the next slide, please. You can see that each of the panelists are neck deep in their carbon reductions. and so in driving that change in their supply chain. And so we're excited to have them here with us. There are 4 takeaways that hopefully you'll get from today's session. The first is that companies are moving away from simply doing reporting to enabling reductions in their supply chain, engaging with their suppliers on their reduction journey, and providing tools to suppliers to help them on their own journeys. And then really the last thing is not just pouring more work on your suppliers, but actually helping them to reduce their carbon emissions. So that's really the 4 main points that we'll try to cover today. And I'll turn it over to Olivia to get us started.
Thanks, Bob. And I just want to express my thanks to you, Anthony, for the opportunity to participate in this panel, deepen my connection with the SPP community. Also, thanks to Augustina for making this all happen. And looking forward to learning from the other panelists and from the questions we get from this group. So quick overview on Emerson. We're a global industrial technology leader. We deliver advanced automation solutions through control and safety systems, software, and intelligent devices. We partner with customers who are in essential industries like energy, chemical, power, and life sciences to help them operate more sustainably, safely, and efficiently, and reliably. So applying those sustainability values, it extends across the value chain and through our suppliers as well and our own operations. From a supply chain perspective, it's a complicated one. We've got commodities coming in from plastics, electronics, steel, machine parts, non-ferrous materials from over 15,000 direct material suppliers. So as part of our responsible sourcing strategy, it's really important for us to stay connected with all the businesses that are part of our organization. I think I won't go through all of the details you see here on the slide because you can see them, but I think you can gather that we have to take a multi-pronged approach to making sure that our businesses, our commodity managers, our supply chain leaders, commodity managers are the ones interfacing with the suppliers so that we're all aligned on what those expectations are. So we achieve that through a combination of trainings, we host webinars, we also establish a baseline of how our top suppliers are performing from an emissions standpoint. Do they even have the data? Do they have the tools they need to establish that understanding? We also make it a point to recognize our suppliers through an awards process, and we're moving towards this direction of bringing sustainability into our performance conversations. Our strategic suppliers, we're actively engaging with them to talk about holistic performance, and sustainability is something we're bringing into that process. Some things that you don't see here on the slide are kind of the governance to support how we all stay connected through these channels that we support from an enterprise standpoint. We have a steering committee, and we also have a network of responsible sourcing champions. So whenever we receive awards such as the CDP Supplier Engagement Leadership position, it's the 3rd year we've been on that. We really make it a point to make sure everyone's aware of it, socialize it, celebrate it, because it's a journey to get to 2030 for our science-based target, and we make it a point to celebrate the wins along the way. So I'd say that's a good overview of how we're approaching it, and look forward to the questions that come after this.
Great. Thanks, Olivia. We'll now turn it over to Lori.
Good morning, everybody. I am Lori Beth Crossley from Cardinal Health. We are a pharmaceutical distributor, and we manufacture and distribute medical devices. My team and I oversee both of the supply chains in those segments, and that includes the Scope 3 engagement work. And I'm going to practice some transparency this morning and admit I was a bit uncertain about participating when Bob first approached me, because we have been very focused on meeting our SBTI target, and we're really just beginning supplier engagement. And so I decided I would combine what we find is working for us with some supplier engagement experience from the past couple of decades in global sourcing. So as we focus on engagement, we found, it's important to include the active listening component, as it is a key to building a supplier relationship. And more importantly, the input you receive will inform and improve your overall program to drive success. And so we have been very focused on being transparent with our suppliers. And we haven't just shared, this is what our program is, but we've also shared how we built our program, how it came about. And not just highlighting wins, but we've also talked through our losses and what didn't work and what were lessons learned that we've taken away. One tool that I have found to be successful is the Six Sigma Voice of the Customer framework. And I changed the name to Voice of the Supplier, practicing innovation. And what I do is I send 4 to 5 questions to a supplier prior to our meetings. And this gives them some time to consider and noodle their answers and how they want to discuss it. But when we meet, I document the responses. And most importantly, I send back an interpretation of the supplier's input and ask if we understood correctly or if we missed any points. And through those dialogues, we gain a lot of insight, and it supports building the supplier relationship. We found when we were considering collaboration and collaborative approaches and looking at our key stakeholders that we tended to overlook a key stakeholder, which is our customers. And we've recently found success partnering with a customer where we have mutual suppliers. We built a joint outreach to our shared Scope 3 low maturity suppliers, and it allowed us to emphasize the importance we are putting behind, reducing emissions. And we've also been able to share a larger pool of tools and resources with the suppliers. I encourage everyone to make a commitment to capacity building and upskilling. We all had to gain skills and knowledge to be successful in the Scope 3 space. And I think so many of us continue to do that. I do. But our suppliers and our sub-tier suppliers do as well. And so what we've started to do is when we are looking at new tools, new platforms, and applications, we've started asking questions in relation to our suppliers. So is this application going to be accessible for them? Is it going to be practical to use? Or is it going to require an outsized level of resources? Can suppliers use it with their suppliers? One of the areas that we've also been considering is when we're looking at the size of the supply chain and the scope, we realize we obviously can't work with everybody one-on-one. And we're all familiar with the phrase train the trainer, which is really about supplier ownership and entities throughout the supply chain owning and being responsible for their tier 1 suppliers. So right now, as we're looking at our Scope 3 roadmap, we're asking is, the program that we're introducing with suppliers, is it replicable? And can we teach it to our tier 1 suppliers so they can use it with the tier 2 suppliers and so on down the supply chain? And if not, what do we need to do right now to make that change so it'll work? We're also discussing ROI with our suppliers. What is that financial investment going to do for them? And I've been highlighting a dual impact of supplier investment, which is, looking at the environmental benefit that positively impacts the whole supply chain, but also how that relates to their value, because that is going to lead to their value increasing, not just with us, but throughout their entire customer portfolio, which leads to increased revenues, which help fund their emission reduction work. So that was my 5 minutes. Thank you for allowing me to share today, and I hope you'll be able to take something of value from that.
Thanks, Lori. Tatiana, turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Bob. Hello, everyone. My name is Tatiana Howard. I am the Supply Chain Sustainability Program Manager in the US and Region Americas for Siemens. I'm excited to be part of this panel and share some of the ways Siemens is reducing Scope 3 emissions while also driving and delivering real value for our suppliers. Siemens, it's a global technology company. It is also an industry leader in sustainability. There's lots of information online, but for the purpose of today's discussion, I would like to share some of the Siemens-specific strategies, but this will not cover everything that Siemens does, so feel free to visit our Siemens Sustainability webpage to see all the details there. However, again, today I will try to focus on topics that are not only about compliance, but they are also about partnership, innovation, and enabling sustainable growth across our supply chain. The first topic I would like to speak about is the Supplier Sustainability Training Program, which is a toolkit for our suppliers. This was initiated in response to the challenges that we were and are still hearing from our suppliers globally. I'm sure it's not just us. I'm sure this is a topic that is very common across the globe for everyone when we talk with our suppliers about the sustainability efforts and what are they doing to decarbonize. A lot of our suppliers are small and medium-sized businesses, and the common themes that come up consistently are that they don't have dedicated resources for sustainability. Therefore, they have a lack of expertise within their company. They want to do the right thing, but they don't even know where to start. And the usual budget constraints that, again, we hear a lot, especially lately. These common difficulties across the board emphasize the need for us to act and to do something to support our suppliers with their sustainability challenges. Therefore, we came up with this supplier sustainability training. It consists of 16 expert-led sustainability webinars on topics like decarbonization, circular economy, carbon accounting, ESG compliance, and a lot of others. These trainings are tailored for different industries and maturity levels. Therefore, everyone, regardless of their knowledge level or the sector that they're in, can find something that is relevant for them and also actionable content. These webinars are available on demand via Supplier Hub within the Siemens Accelerator, making learning flexible and accessible for everyone. So you will see some embedded links here, and you can feel free to access them and visit them for yourselves. Siemens decided that by investing in the supplier education, we are raising sustainability awareness within our supply chain and empowering our suppliers through guidance, know-how, real-life examples, practical tools and methods to ensure that our supplier partners are equipped to meet our joint sustainability requirements and drive sustainability in their own operations. So this is something we're doing to, again, enable that sustainability journey within our supply chain, especially with small and medium-sized suppliers. The second topic that I want to talk about is that we are encouraging our suppliers to sign our net zero pathway commitment. This is a formal pledge. We ask suppliers to actively engage with us in and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in line with science-based net zero targets. report their carbon emissions by participating in our Carbon Web assessment, and collaborate with us on sustainable innovations. This commitment moves beyond reporting. It's about taking real action and fostering collaboration to achieve real, meaningful impacts. And the last resource I would like to talk about today is a free Siemens-developed web-based tool called the Digital Business Optimizer, or the DBO. This is a tool that helps assess sites' carbon footprint, explore technology investment options for reducing energy costs, improving resilience and lowering carbon footprint, as well as calculate the expected return on investments for sustainability projects. The DBO provides actionable insights and scenarios, making it easier to align sustainability with business resilience and cost savings. One thing that I want to highlight here is that this tool is currently only available for the US geography. So if you try it out, and I encourage you again to try it out, make sure that whatever address you put in there to see what you can do in terms of sustainability and resilience, it is a US address. And in closing, I want to just summarize real quick that Siemens is supporting our suppliers with practical trainings, as you can see, encouraging real commitments to achieve net zero, and provides also digital tools that make sustainability both achievable and meaningful. We believe the strategies empower our suppliers on their sustainability journey, ensuring we move forward together towards a more sustainable future. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions when we get to the Q&A.
Thanks, Tatiana. Oliver, take us home here before we get to Q&A. I'll just remind everyone. I'll just remind everyone that you can start putting questions in, and we'll try to get it to as many questions as possible after Ollie finishes.
Yeah, let's have plenty of questions, people. Come on, that's good. So delighted to be here. My name is Oliver Hurry. Great to hear that Bob and you and Anthony got together at the Scope VP Group meeting. I didn't realise that, so it's great to hear. Delighted to be on an SPP call. I was part of the original team that helped put the SPP together. I wouldn't be on an SPP USA call without having my Ryder Cup mug here, just to make the point. If you don't know what that is, it's basically Europe beat the USA. That's all you need to know. But we're all friends, obviously, so I'm delighted to be here. So I chair the Scope VP Group, which is about 3,000 people, including Olivia and Laurie and others who we all know very, very well. I know there's some of you on the call, and we meet very regularly to try and understand the challenges of Scope 3, what's happening, what's working. So what I thought I'd share with you today is two quick things. One is these are the problems and the challenges submitted by the Scope VP Group from last month. So what I do is I take hundreds of problems from the group every month. I stick it through ChatGPT, obviously. I mean, you know, I'm not a genius. And we actually display the kind of trends and show where these issues are. So I'll talk through some of those. The other thing is I'm going to give you a quick story from a week ago. So I was very lucky to be chairing and helping to advise the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative's Supplier Decarbonisation Summit, and there was some fascinating stuff that came out of that, so I'll hopefully give you some pointers from that. Just very briefly, though, a huge shout for Laurie and her slide. I love the voice of the supplier piece. That is something that is absolutely huge in the peer group at the moment, is really making sure we understand and listen to suppliers well. And I see Alex and Robin in the audience from CBRE. If you want to check out what they did with Bagnalls, one of their suppliers, it's a fantastic story of listening and engaging and working with suppliers. That's the number one challenge of the peer group, supplier engagement, and actually helping them to engage and to be incentivized to take action. It's been the number one challenge for the entire 6 years of the Scope 3 peer group. A lot of people would like data quality, PCFs, and technology to be number one, but it's not. It's number two. How to get PCF data, how to get the information that you need, how to take action on it. Now, I would say how to take action on data has been the biggest trend in the last month, particularly at Climate Week. That's all we were discussing. It's not how to get data, but what actually to do with it. And a big shout out for the SPP's carbon pricing project. Worth Googling that, the SPP carbon pricing. That's a pilot group of companies that we helped put together. that is actually piloting a methodology for using product carbon footprint data to make decisions on tenders. And that is using data for commercial value to suppliers. So do check that out as well. Number 3, very relevant to the SPP, is how to get procurement leading this, procurement supporting it and leading it. I think we all agree on that. Something the Scope 3 Peer Group has been developing is Scope 3 procurement training. We developed that over the last 2 years. That's just gone live. And helping procurement to understand Scope 3 in procurement language, I think, is absolutely critical. 2 technologies and platforms. Just a big shout out actually for Bob and his ctrl+s. I know you haven't mentioned it, Bob, but one of the best platforms in Europe. Looks like you're expanding out into the US with Bob as well now. But what tools to use, how to mix and match those tools, how to build your stack, a huge question for the peer group. There are so many tools and platforms, and understanding the interoperability with them is pretty crucial. But everyone's on that journey at the moment. The last one is very important, something I've been having emails on literally today as people have started to read the net zero standard and realize that market-based mechanisms, if essentially looking at renewable energy for your suppliers, biodiesel, are not going to be counted by the SBTi. So that is a bit of a cat amongst the pigeons in the peer group about what that's going to mean, because a lot of people, including people like Mars, have invested heavily in the potential to invest in renewable energy for their supply chain and other things. So we talk a lot about the GHG protocol and the SBTi, mostly moaning about them, but we do talk about them as well. So those are some of the things. So just finally, last week, so one of the things that I've been noticing for some years is, as well as sending suppliers lots of similar surveys, but that are slightly different with different questions, I'm sure you've all been noticing that you've either been running or been invited to lots of different supplier engagement days on decarbonisation. If we all run our own supplier engagement days slightly differently with slightly different information and capability building to all the same suppliers, it's going to pretty much load them up and confuse them. So one of the things that I was helping the PSCI do was run one supplier decarbonisation summit for all their members, all 83 pharmaceutical companies. And that's what we did last week, and it went really well. But I formed a supplier panel for that summit, and I said, what is it, suppliers, that you definitely don't want this to do, and what is it that you do want to do? The number one thing, to speak very frankly on behalf of the suppliers, was it's all well and good you are giving us knowledge and content and support on decarbonisation, but when we come back with decarbonisation solutions and your procurement team say, what's decarbonisation? What's this? We're not interested in it. Just give us low cost. It all falls apart. So one of the things we did is we brought CPOs into the PSCI summit, and the CPOs provided messages of, we're serious, we're going to take it seriously. If you decarbonise, we promise to listen, which was an awesome win. It's the first time that CPOs have been hugely engaged in that fashion in the PSCI. So get the CPOs engaged in the supplier engagement, at least at some level. Let the suppliers know that you're serious about decarbonisation, not just that you're going to help them. The second one was alignment. Pretty obvious. If all 83 pharmaceutical companies are going to get aligned on at least some of the requests to those suppliers, it makes a huge difference to those suppliers. So they did, they got aligned, they got pretty clear on what they wanted those suppliers to do. And that was a huge win for the suppliers. Something else, and Bob, you mentioned this quite rightly, often we treat suppliers all the same. It is a cliche, and I'm sure you all know the best practice is to segment your suppliers. But particularly in the pharma industry, there's some big first-tier suppliers, the big CDMO suppliers, who are much better than most of the pharma companies at decarbonisation. So if you put them in working groups where they get taught how to set a science-based target, they're going to lose interest really rapidly. So the PSCI has a maturity model where suppliers actually almost self-select themselves into a maturity model, and we ran support and information so the suppliers could choose their capability building based on their maturity. And that, plus the demand signals from the CPOs, hopefully is going to allow them to go away and actually get decarbonisation done, because that's what we're all here for. So hopefully that's useful. A bit of insight from the last week and from the last year. But yeah, I tried my best to follow those 3 great speakers. Hopefully that was useful. And looking forward to lots of questions. And if there aren't any, I'm going to be really upset, and I'll have to think of my own. So make sure you do.
Thanks, Ollie. Appreciate that. And appreciate, I see a few questions coming in. As the questions continue to come in, I did want to ask a couple of questions based on the presentations. Both Olivia and Lori talked about upskilling, and I just would like to give them a little bit of time here to maybe give us a little bit more insight into how they do that, why they do that, and share some insights about the success that they've had there. Olivia, you want to go first?
Sure, I'm happy to get started. So when it comes to why we train and how we train, I mean, I think for the why, one of the first supply chain sustainability lessons that everyone has to understand is that, our scope 3 equals the supplier scope 1 plus 2, as well as their scope 3 upstream. So I think just articulating that Emerson has a net zero target, scope 3 is a part of that. To meet that scope 3 target, we need our suppliers to be a part of that journey. And articulating how we're connected in that sense has been one of the first lessons we needed to have our supply chain leaders understand, our commodity managers understand. We also have a network of responsible sourcing champions who are dedicated volunteers within our supply chain functions to kind of serve as the local experts to make sure our local teams are prepared to articulate that to suppliers. And through webinars and training modules that we invite our suppliers to participate in, we articulate that exact same message. So that's kind of like the first why lesson, the starting place for everyone to be on the same page. I would say the other trainings we put out and content we share through the webinar. So the joiners on that webinar are both suppliers and also Emerson supply chain staff. So we're learning together. We are our supply chain community. We talk about technical things like how do you calculate your emissions? We've also talked about how Emerson got started on its sustainability journey with energy treasure hunts or energy audits, focusing on those low-hanging fruits. How did we set up teams to do that? We also have suppliers joining on the webinars, so suppliers can inspire each other to say, hey, we're supplying similar commodities. Maybe that company's a little bit bigger, maybe they're smaller, maybe they're also privately held, but they were able to have a conversation with their leadership teams to align on, this is a value that we share with our customers and in our own operations. So there's kind of that technical training on calculations, trainings on how to actually do the work. And we're also looking to make sure that these trainings are applicable to suppliers in different industry verticals. So we're always looking to kind of expand the participant pool. Sometimes we go at it from a high level on just how to set a target versus how to get the work done. And I guess the last comment, maybe before Lori jumps into, we did start socializing and sharing these concepts through what we called greening together summits in our first year of engagements. So we had a total of 6 summits over the course of 2 years, one in the Americas, one in Europe, and one in Asia, to make sure our leadership teams were connected to theirs. And that's kind of where we started this spirit of information sharing, knowledge sharing. And then we went to a virtual setting through webinars and trainings to reach more suppliers and more local teams.
I
Thank
like
you,
that
Lori.
idea, Olivia. And so I made a note of that for our teams because I think that would be a great addition, is having those meetings in the different regions and involving, the different functional teams within Cardinal Health along with the suppliers. When we actually sit in a very unique position within Cardinal in that we are in the ESG sustainability department, but we are actually tasked with responsible sourcing, not necessarily the global sourcing teams. We're responsible to make sure that that is occurring across all of our global sourcing units in both segments. And so what we have started to do when it comes to training and upskilling is really, when we're looking at collaborative initiatives, the first question is, can we bring our suppliers in? Can we let them know about it? Can we get them involved or interested in initiatives like the Scope 3 peer group, where people come together, there's a lot of transparency, there's a lot of sharing. When we are first looking at those types of initiatives, one of the first questions that we ask is how many of our suppliers are already involved with this group? Is it a significant number? Are we going to have to build up, that involvement? We do the same thing with tools and platforms. What are we looking at for a population already utilizing this platform so that we can relieve some of that supplier fatigue with all of their different reporting and the different types of data that they're reporting to all types of different entities. And as we start to develop tools within these initiatives, the drive is, for instance, through NAM, we worked on developing a very short, very simple survey of approximately 20 questions with everything being drop downs so that low maturity suppliers can start, engaging with those types of tools and reporting out that information. And so that right now is really how we're addressing the upskilling and capacity building.
Thanks. Appreciate those insights. Going to some of the questions that you put out there. One of the questions is, do any of the panelists track suppliers' actual reductions or just track engagement and goals? Maybe Tatiana, can you take a shot at that one?
Yes. So we do track both engagement and reductions. We do reporting on a yearly basis for years now. On also Scope 3. So we do track reductions through a survey that we send out and suppliers fill out. Now we're moving to the next level, doing carbon accounting and trying to get more granular into PCF rather than corporate carbon footprint for our suppliers. That's still work in progress, but we're making progress there for sure. So yeah, the answer is yes, we do track that. And we also incentivize our suppliers for reporting their carbon emissions and reducing their carbon footprint. And by including this sustainability efforts or into like our sourcing decisions.
Great, thank you. I have a couple of good questions from Eric. Let me pose this first question to you, Oliver. Do we have a sense of relative maturity in the journey of addressing Scope 3? For example, what is the best sense of the percent of companies which have not started addressing Scope 3 or are still working on spend-based emissions versus those that have progressed beyond?
I'll give the answer that I don't have the stats to hand, but I can definitely give you a vibe. I put a link to the maturity benchmark that we offer in this Scope 3 Pickup. It's a free resource. It's wonderful. I think it's definitely polarizing. So there are small companies that are doing quite a lot. There's still a significant number of companies that are not doing a lot, but we are making progress. I saw news recently that in North America, the use of data, quality data beyond spend-based in North America is much, I think 10% at least points lower than in Europe. So in North America particularly, that report, I think you can Google it, gave you some real indication that North America is a little bit behind on that, obviously for the regulation versus the kind of investor and board pressures there. It is improving, but there's so much confusion about product carbon footprint data and the quality of data. People are still paralyzed and unsure about what steps to take to get the data, but how good that data will even be, or how actionable, most importantly, that data will be. I think the cliche you hear in absolutely every single Scope 3 conversation is don't make perfect, be the enemy of good, and just get started. I mean, I'm surprised if they won't be the takeaways today. But again, there's a lot of there that's true. I think you can get decent data. A lot of the things you need to do with your suppliers, like help them invest in renewable energy, you don't need a huge amount of data to work out that that's a good idea to do. So it is getting better, but it's getting very slowly. And I think one of the reasons it's not improving faster is the standards bodies kind of being a little bit all over the place. I think ultimately the market of tools and platforms, I know for a fact, is over bloated and over promising, and the trust in tools and platforms at the moment in scope 3 isn't at a very high place, but that still shouldn't hold people back to make investments with people that they trust. So I think there's a number of reasons why it's not as good as it should be, but yeah, there are good signs.
Great, thanks. I knew you'd have data. It's just definitely appreciate you sharing your insights there. One of the things that in the presentations that jumped out at me, Lori, that you had done is talking about cascading the train the trainer kind of a thing. And there's a question in here that says, do you have training on how your suppliers could engage your tier 2? If yes, is it replicable for tier 2 global suppliers? So kind of along the same lines, maybe just share some ideas of how you're helping pass that down, tier N.
So we have not put together that final program to release, but what we've started to do is, as we're talking to suppliers, is asking questions about, okay, this part of our program is this, what do you think about this part of the program? What would you need in order to take this and take this yourself and teach it to the tier 2 suppliers? It's really just asking that question, let us help you, tell us what you need. And right now we're looking at how do we revise the program with all that, with the changes that are coming in so that we can roll it out. We'll then have a small group of suppliers actually take a look at it, come together in a meeting and provide us with final feedback to come up with a final version and then roll it out to our tier 1 suppliers to use. So we're putting that framework together now, which I'm happy to share once that's completed in the next couple of months.
I love that cascading piece as well. Just very briefly, sorry. I think, Laurie, the story of how to reach your tier 2s is to help your tier 1s reach your tier 2s, I think is really, really good. Just quick one on the procurement training we developed. We've seen quite a lot of more advanced peers who procurement is pretty much on board with decarbonisation, wanting to give that procurement training to their suppliers' procurement teams, which is a really interesting way to get procurement in a value chain aligned on at least the same metrics. Sorry, Tatiana.
No, but we're taking that training, Ollie, and we're looking at that and saying, okay, how do we get that into the hands of our tier 1 suppliers so that they can bring theirs on as well? So that is part of the discussion. Sorry, Tatiana.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. The more cascading we do, the better. We need alignment horizontally, but we also need alignment on messaging and language and things vertically, don't we? So.
Tatiana.
Yes, at Siemens, what we have 2 modules in our supplier training where we do talk about how to engage TRN. This is a big challenge, I think, for everyone. I think we're all figuring out and have a lot of progress done for our tier 1, but tier N is still a big question mark for everyone across the board. But I think the important part is to educate our suppliers, like it was said already, and also try to keep the tools and the reporting into some shape or aspect standard, because it's very hard to translate numbers when the methodology is used and the numbers that are being reported are not really translatable. So I think the more we educate our tier 1 and encourage them to engage their tier 1 respectively, which is our tier N, then the more we can have accurate numbers and get that engagement further down.
Thank you. Good insights. One last question, and I just ask each of the panelists maybe to just spend, actually the 3 practitioners. I'm going to exclude you, Ollie, on this
It's
particular
fine.
one. Just maybe a 30-second on what strategies you found to be most effective in reducing supplier burden on this when engaging with them on carbon reporting. So maybe Laura, you could start with that, and just short 30 seconds on that.
Sure. I think the most effective strategy that we've used is really asking questions and talking, because, just ask the suppliers, which we don't often do. And we've, that's been a bit of a struggle here to get people used to having those conversations. What are you doing? What are you reporting? What is your interoperability with your data? How can we get that to work with other suppliers within our supply chain? Going out to those suppliers and having those conversations, I think has been the biggest, that has the most value for us right now, where we are in this process. I think that was 30 seconds.
I can go next. When we think about making it easier for suppliers and supporting them in reporting, we put ourselves in their shoes, right? We're also a supplier to our other customers. We get a bunch of surveys as well. We recognize there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all option. So the third-party provider we work with to collect emissions data from our suppliers, we do work with them to make sure they can collect public CDP response data. So that piece is covered for the larger suppliers. Then we also have some pockets of where they're sending us PDFs of sustainability reports, and we've got to work out a process to capture that as well. So that's kind of on the reporting burden side. I think Lori makes a good point too. Keep the conversation open to ask how else they're reporting. They're always keen to tell us about their EcoVadis scores. And to kind of support them, we try to make the surveys, choosing a partner that makes it as self-service as possible, self-explanatory. I think I'm at 30 seconds plus.
Very good. Thank you. Tatiana.
So, yes, I'll wrap up. I think it's important to keep a clear communication and to offer support when questions arise. For us, we make sure that we engage our buyers and commodity managers, who are the main contacts for our suppliers, to answer any questions they may have and support them. We also use a standard simplified digital platform that we ask them to try to navigate on their own and answer the questions. It's not a lot of questions. So again, it's pretty self-explanatory, but if questions arise, we are there to support. And of course, I mentioned again, the training and the knowledge sharing. We offer training on how to use this platform and explain, again, the different types of questions that are being asked in there to try to guide our suppliers to make it easier for them. But I have to say there's definitely survey fatigue and competing priorities that suppliers have. So I think we mentioned that previously in this discussion, but yeah, it would be great. And for us also, it will make our life easier and everybody's life easier if the surveys become more standard and data is transferable. So let's hope that that happens soon.
Thanks, Tatiana. Thanks. We're kind of at the end of our time. Didn't get to all the questions, but I first of all want to say thank you to the SPP, especially Augustina, who this couldn't have happened without her. So really appreciate all your help there, and to our panelists. Any of you who have been on a panel like this know that there's work that goes into preparing this and participating in this, and they all did a fantastic job, and we appreciate their time commitment to share their ideas with you. Just to kind of wrap, we said there were 4 takeaways. Hopefully you got some ideas around moving from simply reporting to really actual reduction, engaging with your suppliers on the reduction journey. I heard some great ideas about that. Tools to help suppliers identify reduction strategies, and then not just pouring more work on them, but reduce the burden, help them see the value in reducing their own carbon reductions. So thank you for attending. Let me turn it back over to Anthony just to wrap here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bob, very much. Thank you, Tatiana, Laurie, Olivia, Ollie, and of course, Augustina for today's been an absolutely fantastic presentation. I wasn't quite sure which direction we would go in, and I find it just fascinating as a final comment that actually much of what we said is traditional supplier relationship management skills. It's listening to suppliers, it's working with them, meeting them where they are, considering the interface that they have to use. And I think that tells us exactly where we are with this. It's the intersection of sustainability and procurement, strategic sourcing, all the things that we talk about. So thank you very much to everyone. And as I mentioned before, if you have not yet taken the pledge, please do look out for SPP USA on the web and on LinkedIn. Be very happy to have you join us, and looking forward to the next event. And thank you very much, and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Augustina. Brilliant work.